Well, here we are then, looking forward to the Scottish Cup final, last season's Scottish Cup final, 5 days before Christmas, being played this season. It's Celtic against Hearts. Stephen Craigan, apart from that, everything pretty much normal.
Yeah, well, it's the first time it's been played 5 days before Christmas. All we need is some snow on Sunday, Rob, and I'm sure everyone else will enjoy a white Christmas and a white Scottish Cup final. But listen, it should be a good game. You know, there's no doubt that Celtic have had a few problems over the past couple of months. Hearts have managed to get themselves to the top of the Scottish Championship. So going into the game, I'd imagine that Hearts will certainly be looking forward to it and think if they can turn up on the day, Celtic can have an off day, then there's a real potential they could be Scottish Cup winners.
All the attention, or most of the attention, certainly from where we look at, I guess, is on Celtic. The pressure's on Neil Lennon, even after back-to-back wins. This is a massive team selection for him, isn't it? Does he bring back the old guard as he's hinted, or does he stick with the guys who've helped turn this corner for him?
Listen, I think that's the million-dollar question. That when you give players opportunities in your side, in the likes of Conor Hazard and Ismaila Soro and David Turnbull, they've had a chance because the players in the games prior to them coming in hadn't been playing well. Results hadn't been good. And when you get your opportunity and you take it, you kind of look to the manager as a player and think, show a little bit of faith in me. I've helped turn around the last couple of games. I've done all you've asked of me. I've influenced games. I've caught, the eye not just of you, but of the supporters and of the media. So, listen, Neil's got a dilemma, no doubt about it. But it's probably a dilemma he's been looking forward to over the past couple of months because he's been picking teams and it hasn't been working. They've been losing games. They've now won back-to-back games. And I can imagine if Soro and David Turnbull don't start the game, I think there could be another protest outside Celtic Park.
Would it be more of a gamble for him to go back to some of the more established names who have got Celtic into this position on the brink of a quadruple treble, rather than sticking with these guys who seem to have given Celtic a new energy?
It's probably a little bit unfair to say that, because a lot of those players have been involved in the the incredible trophy haul that Celtic have had over the past 3 or 4 seasons. So, to suddenly turn your back on them would be a little bit unfair. But listen, we all know how football works. And no matter whether you're a young player or an experienced player, football is about taking your opportunity when it comes along and then giving the manager that decision to make. So, listen, I think everybody's pointing towards Scott Brown. And I've said previously, I think it's been a little bit unfair on Scott Brown. I think he should have been managed better over the past 18 months. He shouldn't have been playing every single game. When you get older, your recovery time can take a little bit longer. You're maybe not as fresh in games. And quite clearly in some of the European games in particular, I think he's been taken off in every European or Europa League group stage game that he started, he was taken off in. So that tells you he's not where he wants to be. So I think if he'd have been managed a little bit better, putting Scott Brown back into a Scottish Cup final side after missing one game could probably have helped him. So Ryan Christie, is another one people are speaking about. Olivier Njam. That's probably the three players, Rob, that everyone's looking at. But on the other hand, when the likes of Soro and Turnbull come in and do well, you've got to show a little bit of loyalty to them. I think them playing in the Scottish Cup final on Sunday and potentially win it could be the making of them. Because when you go to Celtic, it's all about winning trophies. People don't ask you how many games you played at Celtic. They ask you how many trophies you won. And this could be a real turning point for those young players to really establish themselves as first-choice Celtic players.
That's interesting what you're saying about Scott Brown. So the removal of Brown in the last couple of weeks has seemed a little bit drastic. And you reckon that's something that could have been happening in a much more gradual way over the course of the season?
Listen, this season and last season, you only have to look at their city neighbours, Rangers, when you look at Stephen Davis. I think Stephen Davis is 6 months older than Scott Brown, yet he hasn't had as many starts. He hasn't been taken off in as many games, and he's still influencing games. He's still affecting games when Steve Gerrard wants him to. He puts him in the big games. He puts him in the European games. He puts him in the big league games away from home. So he's if he had been managed that way, maybe is it down to strength and depth? Maybe Neil Lennon felt he didn't have enough strength and depth to maintain the level of performance that Scott Brown was putting in. Maybe now looking at it, he has with the likes of Soro. Could he have played in Cham in that position? Callum McGregor's playing a little bit deeper. So maybe Neil Lennon should have trusted himself a little bit more, trusted his judgment a little bit more, just to try and keep Scott Brown going. Because there's no doubt he's not finished as yet. He still has some mileage in him. but it's how he's managed from now on in will depend how many games he can play.
David Turnbull's made a massive impact, hasn't he, in the last couple of games for Celtic? I think maybe we expected that this would have happened a bit sooner, but for all sorts of reasons, it's happening right now. He was a Motherwell player from the age of 8. You knew him in a coaching sense from the age of 16. Was it always inevitable that he was going to become a real star?
Well, I'll be honest, it was interesting when he first came in. I think he was 16, you're right. He just turned 16 in early July. And strangely enough, I didn't really notice him in the first couple of months when I was working with him, because there was older players in my under-20 squad, as it was then, who were closer to the first team. And the aim at that stage, within my role, was to get players into the first team. Guys like Ben Hall and Chris Cadden and Alan Campbell and Ross MacLean, they were probably slightly ahead of David, because David was only 16. They were 17, 18, 19, some of those boys. So they were trying to push towards the first team. So it wasn't until about 3 or 4 months in that I actually managed to see what David was all about. Those guys had kind of progressed into the first team squad, and David became one of the mainstays in the under-20s. But it was probably 2 or 3 months in when I realised we used to do little rondos, and it was 5v2, small possession squares. And I realised one day that David very seldom was in the middle. And that was because he didn't give the ball away. And even for someone so young, and I've got to say, at 16, he was this skinny little kid. But he was good in possession. He had high standards when playing the game. And he had something a little bit different than the rest with regards to his technical abilities, receiving skills of the ball. So it took a little while to kind of, to catch my eye effectively. He played a lot of under-18 football at that stage because he couldn't get a game in the under-20s. And you talk about someone who'd been at a club from the age of 8 till 16, Rob. It's, that's a lot of coaches he's went through. So I was kind of at the tail end of that, getting all their good work right through the Motherwell Academy. As he started progressing through, I think at the end of his first season, he played in the Youth Cup final. He actually played in the Youth Cup semi-final, I think early March or so, around about 2015. And he scored a double up in Dingwall against Ross County, and we won 4-0. And I thought, he's making his mark. He played in the final a couple of weeks later. In the following season, he just continued to grow. He continued to get better. I think he probably put on about a stone and a half in 18 months to 2 years. He started to fill out. And that's when he started to, almost fulfill his potential.
As you look back on his development, of all the young players that you've worked with, where would he rank?
I would say he's the best. When you listen to Stephen Robinson speaking over the last, 18 months or so, when David was making his breakthrough, and he probably said the same, that, he hasn't worked with someone as good as David, because the biggest challenge for young players is when they progress up the levels is, can they remain true to themselves? Can they still carry out the things that come naturally to them on a football pitch? Nothing fazed David. Going from 16-year-old to playing under 18s, to playing under 20s, to playing in Motherwell's first team, and watching him the last couple of games for Celtic, he still plays the same way. He wants to get on the ball. He wants to find pockets of space. He wants to affect the game going forward. He wants to get shots off. I mean, he scored a great goal against Lille last Thursday night. And I've watched that many a time, not just in training, but in under-20 games, reserve games, and first-team games at Motherwell. So that was the big challenge for David, was, would he change his game? Would he try and adapt to suit other people? But he didn't, and he's continued to grow that way. And now, at the start of his Celtic career, he is probably a little bit away fitness-wise and sharpness-wise. He will get better. He will get stronger. So, the only way I can see him going from now on in is upwards.
Did Stephen Robinson take much convincing about putting Turnbull in the first team, Craigs?
Do you know what the hardest bit was, Rob? When David was scoring goals and he was affecting under-20 games, it's a bit of a jump. Some young players have to go out and loan. Some players have to, Jake Hastie, for example, Jake went out to Alloa, he went to Airdrie, and then eventually became a first-team player at Motherwell. But David Turnbull, along with Alan Campbell, didn't go on loan because we felt at that time they were good enough to make that step into the first team. And when David was almost ready to play, the style of Motherwell probably didn't suit David's play at the time. Motherwell went 3-5-2, they went back to front, and Stephen's biggest fear was you would put him in the team and he wouldn't get a touch of the ball. He wouldn't be able to affect the game the way he wanted to. So he had to be patient with him. He probably put him in a little bit later than what he wanted to. And Stephen and I used to have many discussions, along with Keith Lasley and Steve McManus, who was there at the time. And I wouldn't say we had fallouts, but David Turnbull was at at the the strong end of those conversations, because I felt he should have been in earlier. Steve McManus did, because we work with him on a daily basis, and Stephen was trying to protect him, us not knowing that because of the style of play wouldn't have suited him. And Alan Campbell was the same. Alan Campbell, I think, got into the side about October, November 2017 and didn't look back. And we felt David Turnbull would be the same, Rob. That minute they get into Motherwell's first team, and we said to Stephen, and Stephen agreed that David wouldn't look back. He wouldn't come back and train with the under-20s. He'd be a first-team player from then on in. And he went and proved that.
Am I right in saying that the first time Neil Lennon saw him close up was in an under-20s game against Hibs, and he came up to you afterwards and said, "Who's the number 8?"
It's funny how these things transpire, but you're absolutely spot on. It was probably around about April or May 2018, and Hibs had that very good under-20 side. I think they won the Scottish Cup that year. They won the league. They were captained by Ryan Porteous, and we played them away in the last day of the season at the Oriam. I had a bit of an understrength side because our first team players were struggling, so Stephen didn't want to take any risks. But David played in the game. Hibs beat us 4-2, and it was a trophy lift right after that game. And after the game, I think we lost 4-2. And after the game, I was just talking to Neil while the players were getting their medals, and we stayed to applaud them and show respect towards their efforts. He actually said to me quietly, "Who's your number 8?" And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because I really like him." I said, "It's David Turnbull." I said, "You've got to keep an eye on him, honestly." I said, "He's a top player." He said, "For even the result and the way the game went," he said, "he was the one player that stood out for me." And I kind of forgot about it. You move on and you disappear and you forget about the conversation. I didn't even tell David about it. But it wasn't until Neil got the Celtic job and the interest appeared, it came back into my mind. And there's no doubt that coaches and managers, they keep an eye on players. They want to follow their progress. So he would have been interested to see when David made the step into Motherwell's first team and how he would react. And to get 15 goals between November 2018 and May 2019 from midfield as a 19-year-old was incredible. So listen, right from that day, it certainly planted the seed in Neil Lennon's mind. And eventually Neil took him to Celtic.
Has it surprised you how long it's taken at Celtic for Turnbull to become an established thing in the first team? I know he's flitted with it, and I know there have been reasons like the Scotland under-21 isolation, etc., reasons why he hasn't broken through. But are you surprised that it has taken so long?
In some ways I am, yes, because he was probably ready to play the minute he joined the club. But Celtic were doing well, they were winning games, and Neil Lennon thought he would stay with, it was Ncham and Callum McGregor, Scott Brown, Ryan Christie playing as a 10. So listen, that's a tough 4 to break into. And then you think about young players when they make that step to a big club, it maybe takes them a little while to get up to speed. We also did of the game for a year, so maybe he was just still finding his feet and getting himself up to speed. But now that he's in the side, I'm actually surprised. Well, I'm surprised because I've watched an awful lot of. I'm surprised people are surprised what he's doing, because I've always kind of known he's had that talent, and certainly the coaching staff at Motherwell when I was there knew he had that talent, and we felt that he could make that step to one of the bigger clubs, whether it be Celtic or whether it be someone down south. We felt he could make that step and he can have that impact. The one thing, David, is he gets frustrated. Whether he got frustrated at Celtic or not, I'm not so sure. But certainly from an 18, 19-year-old being desperate to play for Motherwell, he was frustrated. He just wanted to progress. And probably towards the latter stage of his Motherwell career, he was ready to make that step up again. So he's had to bide his time. He's had to be patient. He will have looked at the bad run the team were on, and he's probably saying to himself, "I'm ready to go. I can show what I can do." But ultimately, Neil Lennon's picked his moment, picked his time. And now that David's arrived, I thought Neil's comments at the weekend were interesting when he said that, he said he knew that David Turnbull was a good player, but he was actually surprised at how good he is. And I think that's testament to David's individual ability, but testament to how well he's adapted to going to a big club.
Do you think he'll be in the Scotland squad in the summer for the European finals?
Well, it's like a lot of players, Rob. We've spoken many occasions, haven't we, of guys like Kevin Nisbet, for example, who's scoring goals all the time for Hibs. He's catching the eye. And if David can keep himself in the Celtic team between now and March, before the World Cup qualifiers start, he's got to put himself in the eye line of Steve Clarke. So I see absolutely no reason why he can't be knocking on the door come March. If his form continues as it has been over the past couple of games, if he's scoring goals, he's affecting games, he's shown that, being that creative player for Celtic doesn't affect him, then absolutely Steve Clarke will have to have a look. That's what you've got to do as a young player. You've got to force the manager to come and have a look at. You've got to force the manager to pick you into the squad by how you perform on a regular basis. That being said, the midfield area for Scotland is very, very strong. But then you take into consideration that Celtic are such a big club, they've such high demands for their players, the expectation and the pressure on them. And if someone at 21 years of age can carry that pressure and still impact and affect games the way David has been over 2 games, then he will certainly be knocking on the door. And I wouldn't be surprised if Steve Clarke gives him a call up sooner rather than later.
This cup final is so big for Celtic in so many ways. It's the Scottish Cup, it's potentially the quadruple treble, but it's also a chance to make it 3 wins on the bounce, to continue this little mini recovery and to potentially relaunch them in the title race, isn't it?
Well, it is, because Neil Lennon was asked at the weekend, after that victory against Kilmarnock, someone said, have you turned the corner? He said, well, we haven't turned the corner yet, but we're starting to get on the right track. And Sunday, as much as it's the cup final and the prestige that goes with it and the quadruple treble, the bigger picture is that it keeps Celtic on the right track. That momentum they've built up over 2 games. They've done that previously. There's probably been too many false dawns over the past couple of months where they think they've turned the corner. They've had a good performance and backed it to be another decent performance, and then they've lost the game and they've kind of fell away again. So this will be a real test of their character to see if they can really kick on and push on. Some of their best performances, you have to say, over the past 3 or 4 seasons have arrived at Hampden Park on the big occasion, whether that's by dominating the game, scoring lots of goals, or the League Cup final last year where they had to grind out a result. They showed a different way to win a game, down to 10 men, Fraser Forster making big saves. So they've got good memories of Hampden Park. And I suppose looking back, that's maybe the reason why Neil Lennon's talking about going back to the tried and tested of previous years, because they have good memories. So it's all about team selection. It's all about the players, again, rolling out another performance. It has to be another step in the right direction for them. Hearts have been a little bit under the radar. Nobody's really mentioned an awful lot about them. That'll suit Robbie Nielsen. But all Celtic fans and players and supporters know, and the manager, that every game they go into, they're expected to win. And I expect them, or certainly they expect to win on Sunday.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you that very question. Will Hearts be loving the fact that all the noise is around Celtic and they are slipping to a certain extent under the radar? But when you start to examine their squad, you pick out players like Craig Gordon and Stephen Naismith and Liam Boyce, and the list goes on. It's a championship team, but it's got Premiership quality players in it, hasn't it?
Listen, it absolutely does, no doubt about it. And the big challenge for those players is to bring their A game to the table. Because anytime you beat the old firm, from one of the smaller clubs, you've got to be right at it. You've got to be right at the top of your game. You can't afford any silly mistakes. You don't want to give the opposition any encouragement. Your goalkeeper tends to have to make a few good saves because they'll have the majority off the ball. But it's when you land in the ball in possession, can you go and, hurt the opposition? And that's where the likes of Liam Boyce and Michael Smith and Craig Halkett, Ollie Lee in midfield, Andy Halliday, Stephen Naismith, you're right. They've got an array of experienced players. So there's a real emphasis on those players to carry the fight to Celtic. But ultimately, when you don't have the ball, you've got to make sure you're organised, you're in a good shape, good discipline about you that allows you to stay in the game. So they'll believe they can go there and win the game, and they have to do that. Albeit, as you say, they're playing in the Scottish Championship. I watched them 2 or 3 weeks ago against Dunfermline through at East End Park, and they struggled. Dunfermline went really high tempo. They closed them down. They turned the back 4. They squeezed the game up. So I'm sure Neil Lennon will have looked at that game and think, well, if we can kind of, produce that type of energy and pace on our team, which ultimately they've got, they could hurt Hearts. But on the flip side, if Hearts can keep them quiet, Rob, and use the quality of Boyce and Naismith in that final third, then it could be a shock result for them.
Does the no fans factor favour Hearts at all? Although when you think about it, they would have had a big support at the game as well. Do you have any thoughts on the sounds of silence and whether that does favour one or the other?
You would think if it's going to favour anyone, it's going to favour Hearts. Celtic have struggled over the past couple of months, and albeit, it can't all be down to lack of supporters, but no matter where they play, home and away, they sell out. They've got great backing who make lots of noise, drive them on when they're going well, drive them on in adversity. So not having that as the extra, because I've played in cup finals, cup semi-finals against Celtic. I've played at Celtic Park, and it's the noise they make can be a little bit, fearsome at times. It almost, you look around and think, oh, this gives them an added advantage. So it almost brings it a little bit closer to an even playing field. But ultimately, Hearts will know they will have to go out and perform at the top of their game. They wanted the Celtic fans cheering them on, singing them on, albeit Hearts would have had a good support. Celtic still would have had the majority of it. So everything that needs to go Hearts' way, right from supporters, right to the big decisions, your defensive, taking your opportunities, being ruthless, everything needs to be in Hearts' favour. And that could be the first one of many for them to go and win the cup.
This is all leading, of course, to your scoreline prediction, which you're about to give us.
Am I? You've just threw that upon me,
yes,
Rob.
You are.
I just think Celtic are going to win the game. Whether that's right or wrong, who knows? Time will tell. But I think Celtic will be too strong. I think they've managed the games very well in the last couple of weeks. Hampden is a place they enjoy going to. That will bring a smile to a lot of the players' faces, and their memory bank will bring up good memories for them. So I will go for a a Celtic 2-0 victory.
Craigs, good talking to you.
Cheers, Rob.